Pingwa.
Hey there folks, this is Ian. I'm an artist at Pingwa, and today I have some quick tips for working in GraphicsGale. To start, we're going to resize our sprite and make a larger sprite while maintaining the pixel aspect ratio. We're going to go to all frames, resample, and then it's going to pop up a dialog. You have some options to resize. You never want smooth on, so let's uncheck that. You can do it by a percentage. And when you change those things, it's going to change both the height and the width, unless you uncheck keep aspect ratio, in which case we can get some weird shaped squished pixels. So I'm going to keep that on for now. Change it to about 400%, click OK, and now we have a bigger image that has maintained the integrity of our square pixels. And then you can go to File, Save As, and output as a separate PNG. Next, we're going to talk about grids and guides. I've got an image zoomed in that's made up of several individual tiles mixed together, and I can turn my grid off or on to see my individual pixels, and it just toggles with the button beside the magnification tray. Beside that, we have custom grids. When you click it, you can make grids of a number of pixels by a number of pixels. So in this case, I have 32 by 32 tiles, and so it's divided up my image so I can see where those individual tiles are. If you want, back in the rollout, you can go to a custom grid and set it up to be whatever dimensions you want. By default, it has some standard sizes, but if you want something slightly different, in this case 48 by 48, we can just make those adjustments in here. And now to enable it, just go back down to the drop down and select it from the list. Not ideal for these purposes. Going back to our default 32 by 32 grid. If you've already set up a grid, clicking none won't remove the existing grid. You have to go back down to the bottom and toggle show grid. Here we have a sprite that, because of his weapon, will no longer fit in the current canvas, so we need to expand that canvas. So we're going to go to all frames, enlarge canvas, so we'll bring up a dialog box. The dialog box has anchor points that you can set for the top, bottom, sides, and diagonals. That's where your frame is going to extend from. So we're going to click the bottom, I'm going to change it from 40 by 40 to 48 by 48 pixels, and click OK. Now we have some extra space around, but we can't actually see it because the background color is so close to the default window. I'm going to turn on the grid just so I can see where it is. Select the bucket tool and fill it in. And turn off my grid. Now I can go back in using my pen tool and I can finish drawing his spear so it fits inside the frame. If this was being used in a sprite sheet, its positioning is fine, but if I want it as a one-off GIF or image that I'm going to share, I might want to position him a little better so he's more centered in the frame. To do that, you can choose the selection tool, drag out a selection, it'll change your cursor into a little crosshairs, which will allow you to move it. You can reposition, and then to set it, you just right-click, and that deselects the image. Then you can fill in any gaps that you've left with the background color. When you're working with multiple images on the same screen, it can be handy to have them both fully viewable and arrange them on the screen. If you go to Window Arrange, tile vertically, it will place them side by side like this. If you go tile horizontally, it will stretch them widthwise and put them one on top of the other. You can also arrange them in a cascade, which will just put the multiple tiles on top of each other, and then you can toggle between them on the screen. Most of the time when I'm working with multiple images, I will tile them vertically. When you want to see an actual scale of your image when you're working zoomed in, particularly when you are working on an animation, the preview window can be very handy. To change the size of the preview window, you can right-click it and change the size that it's viewed at. 200% is generally handy. You can go larger if you want, you can go smaller, or you can see the actual size that it will be displayed on the screen. You can also speed up the timing or slow it down to see if your frame delay is set optimally, or maybe you need to tweak it to get some better motion. And then you can set it back to actual speed. Recoloring sprites when you want to have multiple sprites, or you want to adjust the colors on your original, is generally simple. You can go over to the palette and adjust the blocks in the palette, but if you have multiple images that are already animated and you want to adjust them at the same time, there are a couple of tricks that you can use. If you try and select the colors from an adjusted sprite and try and transfer those over to your original sprite, because of the indexed palette, it won't quite work. It will try and approximate those colors based on what you have in the other sprite. So we're going to do something slightly different. We can go to all frames, color depth, to change the current bit depth of our color palette. So changing it to 16-bit color will remove the rigid restrictions of an 8-bit palette and allow us to select colors outside of that range from a secondary image. And we'll quickly change it back to 8-bit and just restore that palette. Now I have my default 256 color palette, but you notice that those palette blocks are different. So I'm going to go over to my palette window, click the little arrow, and go to Save Palette. I can set a name for it and save it. Then I can go back to my original image. Using that same little down arrow in the palette, I can load a palette. I'll choose the palette file. I'm going to import from that file. Select it and open it. It will display the difference in the two palettes. And there's a toggle button for matching colors. That will try and approximate the same colors in the palette when available, but we don't want that on because that can also change the way the colors look. So we uncheck and click OK. And now we've completely palette swapped our original image, but there's an issue because we have multiple frames. You'll notice in the animation, he just flashes blue for a single frame. It hasn't adjusted the palettes of all the other frames. Just to quickly show you, if we load up that same palette that we had from before, and this time we keep match pixels with colors selected, and then we convert all, let's see what happens. It's approximated those colors based on what existing colors there were, and it's not quite what we want. So if that ever happens, it's because you have that box checked. To make sure that all of the palettes of each frame get switched over, we have to go to File and Properties, and in our properties we have to go to our palette settings, and we have to use a single palette. This is going to force the palette that's used on the first frame into all subsequent frames. So now we can go back to our little drop down and load our palette. We'll import that file. We're going to convert all of the colors. We're going to uncheck match pixels with colors, and now it's changed all of our frames. So we've quickly recolored the entire animation. So those are just a few tips. Practice with them, get comfortable with the program, and until next time, keep drawing.